Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. The big news of the week remains the investigations into Russia's meddling in our election and the reciprocal role played by the Trump people. Here are the latest headlines. The Financial Times reports that the FBI is setting up a special section based here in Washington to coordinate its investigation. According to the Times, the move is a sign of how seriously the Bureau is taking allegations of Russian meddling into American politics, and is also aimed at giving FBI Director James Comey greater visibility into the investigation. Its details. There will be more than 20 dedicated agents working on the investigation. They will brief Comey on a weekly basis. Meanwhile, NBC News has confirmed that bombshell Washington Post report that the United Arab Emirates arranged a secret meeting in January, a week before the inauguration, between Blackwater founder Erik Prince and a Russian close to President Vladimir Putin as part of an apparent effort to establish a back-channel line of communication between Moscow and President-elect Donald Trump. The Post noted that Prince presented himself as an unofficial envoy for Trump. The Blackwater founder gave $250,000 to the Trump campaign and pro-Trump super PACs last year, and he's been seen in the Trump transition offices in December. A spokesman for Prince rejected the Post story, and the White House called the suggestion of a backwater channel ridiculous. Well, meanwhile, as the investigation of the Trump-Putin connection moves forward, Trump pushes stories that distract attention from the investigation. Yesterday, for example, Bloomberg's Eli Lake reported White House lawyers last month learned that the former National Security Advisor Susan Rice requested the identities of U.S. persons in raw intelligence reports on dozens of occasions to connect to the Trump transition and campaign, according to U.S. officials familiar with the matter. Well, today, President Trump retweeted a Drudge Report headline about that story. In an exclusive interview with Andrea Mitchell, by the way, Susan Rice today explained there is a big difference between requesting information about sources in intelligence reports and surveilling political opponents, as President Trump has alleged. Let's watch her.
The allegation is that somehow Obama administration officials utilized intelligence for political purposes. That's absolutely false. There were occasions when I would receive a report in which a U.S. person was referred to, name not provided, just U.S. person. And sometimes in that context, in order to understand the importance of the report and assess its significance, it was necessary to find out or request the information as to who that U.S. official was.
Well, Congressman Adam Schiff, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, said the White House is trying to change the focus and divert the investigation into his campaign's ties to Russia. Let's watch this.
If anyone in the White House had a concern about any of these materials, they should have been shared and not gone through this charade that we saw over the last 2 weeks. What prompted that? What was the urgency there when we've already asked for materials about incidental collection? And I have to think the urgency was created at that Monday hearing when James Comey said not only there was no truth to the president's claim that he was surveilled or wiretapped or what have you, but also when the FBI director said that the Trump campaign team was under an FBI investigation. I think this was the response to that rather breathtaking hearing.
Well, Congressman Denny Heck of Washington State is a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Simon Marks is the chief correspondent for the Feature Story News, and David Cornyn is Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones. Congressman, let me ask you about this. What do you make of this investigation, and now the fact that Comey, the FBI director, is really kind of focusing attention, creating a special section to go into what happened between Russia and the Trump people?
So one former FBI agent indicated that this represents a surge in resources. Anybody associated with the Trump orbit that was involved in Russia financial entanglements probably was calling their lawyer today, Chris. That's what I make of it.
Let me ask you about this other latest bombshell story, that there was a meeting 9 days before inauguration between the Blackwater founder, who's the brother of the person, Betsy DeVos, of course, who was named by Trump to be Secretary of Education. Her brother, the guy who met over in the Seychelles with the Putin guy, gave a ton of money to Trump. What is a huge backer of a presidential candidate who has already become a president-elect doing fishing out there, putting together relations with Russia? I don't know whether it's illegal, but it certainly suggests more entanglement between the Trump folks and the Putin folks.
Chris, there's so much smoke here. Every smoke alarm in the house is going off. There's so much smoke here, you can't see a foot in front of your face. Listen, this thing is taking on its life of its own. It's gathering speed. It's the Senate, it's the FBI with new resources. And by the way, I have it by word tonight that the House is going to get its investigation back on track. The chair and the ranking member, I believe, are near agreement on a witness list so we can enter the auction. And as I have said all along, I wouldn't be the slightest bit surprised if there aren't also some local prosecutors looking into some things like this.
Is the chairman of your committee his own man?
Well, Chris, I am going to give him the benefit of doubt of an opportunity to get this back on track.
Okay,
But
well,
I asked him to recuse himself. I think that was the right thing to do. But right now, let's focus on getting it back on track.
Well, the reason I asked that is obvious, but I also know from a former member of the House who's now in the Senate once told me that when you go into markup and you actually have to write bills, you can sometimes realize that one of your colleagues is in the tank with some corporation. They begin to behave like they're not really their own person. We've seen pretty adequate evidence that Mr. Nunes is not his own person. What's he doing hanging around picking up the laundry from the White House and taking it back to the White House after he's cleaned it by saying he's an investigator? He wasn't an investigator. He was a delivery boy, bringing the stuff back that they gave him and saying it was news and alarming news. If that isn't showboating for the president, I don't know what it is. What do you think it was?
Well, I think the best thing that can be said about it is that it's ham-handed. As I've said all along, I feel like I'm watching a 3D movie. Deception, deflection, and distraction. That's what he's trying to do, but it's not going to work.
Well, one of your colleagues on the committee, Joaquin Castro, and
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.